Malik Carter didn't want trouble. He wanted A's, peace, and a fair shot at that Stanford scholarship he had tacked to the refrigerator with a rusted Superman magnet. He was the kind of kid who volunteered at the shelter on Saturdays, taught his little cousin fractions on Sundays, and always came home before the streetlights hummed on. But all of that meant nothing in Ashwood, a town where power had a color, and Malik's skin wasn't the right shade. It started in the lunchroom. Bradley Holloway, pale, cocky, the kind of rich you could smell, had never liked Malik. Maybe it was because Malik's essay beat his in the statewide contest, maybe because the teacher praised his presentation, or maybe just because Bradley had been raised on a silent rule. If a black kid shines too bright, snuff him out. The day it all turned was quiet, too quiet. Bradley had shoved Malik's tray off the table, then smirked, leaning in, whispering just loud enough for the nearby tables to catch it. "Know your place, boy." A few students gasped. One laughed. But Malik? He stood tall, shoulders back, heart pounding like a war drum. He didn't fight. He didn't yell. He walked straight to Principal Lawton's office and filed a complaint. For once, the system listened. Bradley got suspended for 5 days. The school board scheduled a hearing. Teachers murmured about accountability. Malik's mom, Danielle, hugged him like she hadn't in years. But across town, behind oak panel walls and marble floors, Judge Kenneth Holloway swirled his bourbon, eyes narrowing over a report he never expected to read. Suspended for racial bullying? My son? The papers trembled in his grip, not because of shame, not because of guilt, but because power, when challenged by someone beneath you, always trembles in rage. He embarrassed this family, the judge said. We'll see how long that little bastard keeps his clean record. Malik had never been in trouble, not even a tardy slip. But a week after Bradley returned, Malik was pulled from his math class by the campus security officer. Danielle got the call at work. Her baby was being arrested for grand theft auto. The words didn't even make sense. "What? My son doesn't even drive," she screamed into the phone. They said Malik had broken into a faculty parking lot and stolen a staff member's BMW. There were no witnesses, no fingerprints, just a conveniently placed anonymous tip and grainy footage that could have been anyone. Danielle fought. She hired a lawyer, scraped together her savings, begged for bail. But Judge Holloway, sitting squarely on the bench during the arraignment, smirked as he read the charge aloud. No bail. Flight risk. Malik stared at the man. Something in the judge's eyes was too familiar, cold, burning. His gut twisted. Danielle pieced it together fast. She'd grown up in Mississippi. She knew the look of a man weaponizing his position. But how do you fight a judge? When every door she knocked on was politely slammed, when every lawyer suddenly became unavailable, she realized this wasn't just personal, it was structural. Malik spent 4 months in juvenile detention awaiting trial. He didn't cry. He read books. He prayed. He wrote his mother letters on every Tuesday. He kept his head down. But his soul began to calcify. The trial was swift. A prosecution built on assumptions. A public defender who barely knew Malik's name. Danielle watched her son's future collapse in real time. Guilty, the judge said. 18 months. The courtroom went silent except for Danielle's scream. Malik didn't flinch. He just turned, looked at his mother, and whispered, "Don't stop." Judge Holloway stood, straightened his robes, and left the room like he had just handed down a parking fine.
She pulled out every file, every scrap of paper. She made copies, filed complaints. She studied laws, spoke to retired judges, tracked down every case Judge Holloway had presided over in the past decade. And patterns began to emerge. Black teens charged with petty crimes, unusually harsh sentences. White teens, probation, second chances, records sealed. One case stood out. A 17-year-old named Deshawn had been sentenced to 5 years for resisting arrest after running from a traffic stop. No drugs, no weapon, just fear. Danielle found his mother. They wept together. More families came forward. Whispers grew into conversations. Conversations became petitions. Then one night, Danielle found what she hadn't dared to dream existed, an anonymous whistleblower from inside the courthouse, a clerk. She met him in a diner off Highway 9. He was nervous, sweat beading under his collar. "He falsified documents," the clerk whispered. "He reshuffled cases so they'd land on his docket. He coached prosecutors, told them how to argue to make certain kids look more dangerous." Danielle leaned in. "You have proof?" The man slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything." She didn't sleep that night. Within days, she filed a formal complaint with the State Judicial Review Board. This time, they couldn't ignore it. The evidence was damning: tampering, bias, conspiracy. But that wasn't enough for Danielle. She called Malik's original lawyer, who, racked with guilt, agreed to reopen the case pro bono. And then she did something bold. She went on live TV. "My son," she said, staring straight into the camera, "was sentenced by a man whose son bullied him for being black. When my son reported it, that man used his robe, his bench, and his title to destroy his life." It went viral. News vans parked outside Holloway's estate. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters. Chanting echoed off the bricks, "Free Malik! Fire Holloway!" The judge's smirk began to crack. Danielle didn't stop. She submitted the flash drive to federal investigators. A probe opened. Subpoenas flew. Malik, still inside juvenile detention, was called to testify. He walked into that courtroom in shackles and walked out a hero. The motion to vacate his conviction passed unanimously. But the story didn't end there. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't just about one boy's freedom. It's about shaking the whole damn system.
Danielle sat through every hearing, every panel review, every news special. She watched the judge squirm. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Then the whistleblower clerk returned. This time, not with files, but with voice recordings. Hidden mic. 14 hours. Captured in chambers. And in one clip, the nail slid into the coffin. "I'm not sending my boy to a school where he gets corrected by some ghetto prince with a golden GPA," Holloway had said. "You let a kid like that climb too high, and soon they forget they're supposed to stay in the dirt." When that audio leaked, even his allies abandoned ship. He was suspended from the bench indefinitely, stripped of authority. A full federal case opened against him, a formal ethics violation filed. Protesters grew in number and noise. Signs outside the courthouse read, "Malik was just the beginning." But Malik didn't want signs anymore. He wanted change. He applied to community college while awaiting the results of his scholarship reapplication. He started a nonprofit with Danielle, Justice Rising, to help other wrongfully charged teens get legal aid. He gave speeches in schools. His voice, once silenced by bars and bias, now boomed through microphones in gymnasiums. And then the final trial came, not for Malik, but for Holloway. The courtroom was familiar. This time, the judge's bench was filled by a black woman in crisp robes. The prosecution laid out the evidence like puzzle pieces already solved. Falsifying documents, conspiracy, Racial bias in sentencing, abuse of power. Holloway pled not guilty, but the jury didn't care for his smile anymore. The verdict rang through the room like thunder on a dry field. Guilty on all counts. The sentence? 22 years. No early parole. As they led the former judge away in cuffs, his robes long gone, his nameplate removed from the courtroom wall, he glanced at Malik in the gallery. That old smirk was gone, replaced by something hollow. Malik didn't return the look. He just turned to his mother and whispered, "Now we breathe." But revenge stories don't always end with gavel strikes. 2 months later, Malik stood in front of the Ashwood School Board, the same board that had once dared not challenge privilege. Now they had invited him to speak. He wore a simple suit, borrowed from his uncle, and held a stack of papers. These are names. Names of students of color who were targeted, suspended, or expelled for things their white classmates weren't even corrected for. And in the wake of Judge Holloway's exposure, some of these students have come forward. They want better. So do I. He presented a 10-page reform proposal: anti-bias training for teachers, transparency in disciplinary actions, a student ombudsman program, and community liaisons. At first, there was silence. Then came the vote. Unanimous approval. The gym erupted in applause. Malik Carter, the boy once chained in silence, now reshaped the system that tried to destroy him. Years passed. Justice Rising grew, expanding to multiple states. Danielle, once the woman screaming in court with no one listening, now stood beside senators helping draft reform bills. Malik eventually earned his degree in criminal justice, not to become a lawyer, but to teach others how to fight. And in a small, crowded room inside a juvenile detention center, not unlike the one he once knew, he told a group of scared teens, "They tried to judge me by my color. I made them judge themselves by their actions." A boy in the front row raised his hand. "How'd you win?" Malik smiled. "I didn't win. We did." And that was the legacy, not just of a mother's flight, not just of a boy's resilience, but of a system forced to reckon with the truth it tried so hard to bury. Because the truth is louder than silence, stronger than bias, and more permanent than power. It was never about revenge. It was about never letting it happen again.